Welcome to the Existential Empath Podcast. My name is Tanya, and I am an intuitive empath. My intention is to share valuable tools and techniques that I have learned so you can tap into your own inner healer naturally and intuitively.
Welcome back, everyone. So today we are going to dive into some pretty heavy topics, but we're going to bring light to them. So we are going to discuss from suicide to success, understanding the lessons in the losses. We're also going to dive into how do we overcome fear and what is the importance of being vulnerable. So today's guest has had quite the experience in some of these areas, and I'm really excited to have him on my show. His name is Kevin Palmieri, and Kevin is the CFO, founder, and co-host of Next Level University, which is a global top 100 holistic self-improvement podcast with more than 1,000 episodes, reaching over 500,000 people. And I think that's fascinating. You all know I just hit my 100th podcast episode, so this is really exciting to have Kevin on my show. So Kevin, thank you so much for joining us today.
Tanya, it is my pleasure. My goal is to keep up with your energy. This is one of my later ones, so I saved all my energy for this. So that is my goal. Thank you so much for having me.
Very much so. So it's a pleasure to have you on. So let's dive a little bit into your story. You know, when I was reading about you, and I've listened to several of your podcasts and learning a little bit about where you were before, it sounded like from on a piece of paper, it looked like you were living the life, right? But from an emotional standpoint, you were in a different state of mind. So let's talk about that. Share, with us a little bit about your story.
Yeah. So thank you so much for the wonderful introduction. Yeah. When I was in my mid-20s, if you looked at me from the outside looking in, you would assume that I was the most successful human being. I had a high-paying job. I had the body of my dreams. I had just done a bodybuilding show, so I was quite literally in the best shape I'd ever been. I had a sports car. I had a new apartment, and my girlfriend was a model. So if you think of all those things, it sounds pretty good.
Fantastic. Yeah.
Right. It sounds really good. But internally, I was pretty insecure. I didn't have any confidence at all. I didn't have any direction. I didn't feel good about myself. I wasn't really proud of the life I was living. And one day my girlfriend came to me. We lived together, and she said, "Kev, I want to move from New Hampshire, where we lived, to California to chase my dreams." And I gave her every reason in the world why she shouldn't do that. Every single reason. Gas is too high, everything, living expenses, blah, 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 blah. And truthfully, I was just very scarce. I was afraid of being left behind. I felt insecure. I felt insignificant. I didn't think I could keep up with her dreams. And she ended up leaving me. She left me. And again, this is exactly what she should have done. She made the right choice, and I'm very proud of her for doing that. She moved across the country, chased her dreams, living her dreams. Awesome. But when she left, I had to look in the mirror and say, well, what's happening here? Am I broken? Is anybody going to want to be with me? Like, what does any of this mean? And that's when I started self-improvement. I started trying to ask myself tough questions. That's all I knew how to do in the beginning. That's where I started. But I remember I heard about positive affirmations, and I was like, I'm going to give this a shot. Seems pretty simple. I'm going to do that. So every night before I went to bed, I would say, I'm talented, I'm handsome, I'm worthy, I'm intelligent. And this year, I'm going to make the most money I've ever made in my entire life. Because I assumed maybe I just hadn't made enough money yet. If I made more money, all my problems would go away. So
right. We always focus on that, right? That's
the first thing. I thought it might work. I said, let's give this a shot. So the next year, so this was at the end of the year when she left me. The next year starts off, and I get a promotion at the company I'm working for. I was doing what's called weatherization. So it was our job to make state and government buildings more energy efficient.
Oh, cool.
We would go into schools and make them more energy efficient. That's the vast majority of the work we did. So that next year starts, I get a promotion. I'm like, okay, so far so good. And we end up having the busiest year in company history. Fast forward to the end of that year, I had been on the road for 10 months out of the 12 months.
Oh,
so
wow.
Every single week, I was living in a hotel. I was living out of my suitcase. I lived in New Hampshire, and we worked in New Jersey. We worked in Connecticut. We worked in Rhode Island. We worked in Delaware. We worked in Pennsylvania. We worked in Virginia. I was all over the place. But that was directly aligned with what I wanted to do. I didn't care. I wanted to make as much money as humanly possible. So we
and
get
travel a little bit, it sounds like.
It was too much. In retrospect, I was definitely burning the candle on both ends, but you don't really think about that when you're making progress towards something. It's just one more week, one more week, one more week. So I get my final pay stub and I'm standing at my kitchen table because my ex-girlfriend took the chairs. They were her chairs. So I was never home. So I never bought new ones. It didn't matter. And I slide open my final pay stub and I made $100,000 at 26 with no college degree.
Wow.
And I was like, for like 5 minutes, I was like, oh my goodness, I did it. And then it was the same thing of, I'm still insecure, I'm still not happy, I'm still dealing with all these things. So I did what anybody does. I started a podcast. I started a podcast called the Hyper Conscious Podcast because for most of my life, I had lived unconsciously. For that previous year, I had lived unconsciously. The opposite of unconscious is hyperconscious.
Yeah.
So that job that brought me all of this money and what I thought was going to be certainty is now taking directly away from my dreams because it's very hard to be consistent as a podcaster when you're in hotels every week. And I start calling out of work. I start showing up late. I start leaving the job site early. And it got to the point where I had to be in New Jersey, which was 6 hours away from where I lived. I would have to be there 7 a.m. on a Monday. I would sleep in my bed from 9 p.m. until midnight. I would get up and I would drive 6 hours straight to the job site. I'd work an 8-hour day and then I would go to the gym after. And that was kind of my life. So it just kept getting worse and I knew something had to shift, but I didn't know what to do. So one morning I was in New Jersey. My alarm clock went off at like 5:15. I wake up, I slide to the edge of the bed. I'm lacing up my work boots, getting ready for work. And it's like there was 10 televisions on in my head at the same time. And every single one was on a different station. And one is saying, you're stuck here forever. I know you want to leave, but if you do leave, what will your friends think? If you do leave, what will your family think? If you do leave, do you really think you're going to be a successful podcaster? That's probably not in the cards for you. And I felt like if I was to end my life, I would take my problems with me. Now, for me, I didn't have a plan. I didn't take any physical action. It was much more suicidal ideation than anything else. But I had
those thoughts ran across your mind and, and I think that's everything starts with a thought, right? So you were moving in that direction.
Yeah. And that wasn't the first time either. I mean, I had already I had these thoughts. I had been to therapy. I thought I was healed and good to go. And this popped back up to the surface. I'm very blessed because I had a mentor at the time who has since become my business partner and my co-host and the co-founder of our company. And I messaged him and I said, hey, Alan, his name's Alan. I'm having these weird, dark thoughts. I don't know what's going on. I don't know what to do. I don't know. I don't know what to do. And he said, Kev, so much has changed internally with your self-awareness over the last few years, but your external environment is pretty much the same. I think you need to make a change. And 3 or 4 months later, I left my job and I went full-time into what we're doing today. And in the very beginning, when I say full-time, there wasn't a lot to do because we weren't successful and it wasn't like it is today. So I became a very broke entrepreneur. I was living off credit cards. I couldn't pay my bills. My girlfriend had to pay rent. I couldn't get Christmas presents. It was a challenge in the beginning, but that's how it all started. Yeah, it all started from the necessity of needing to make a change, going all the way to heck no, and saying, well, I'm willing to bet it all on heck yes. And that's how it started.
Yeah. And let's talk about that. How when we shift our internal, it takes a little bit of time for us to shift the external. Because I, very similarly to you, I was working in healthcare for 15 years. I was burning both ends of the candle. I was exhausted. And I knew I was kind of vibing out of that traditional medicine type, the environment. And I was moving more into a more holistic type environment, but my energy wasn't matching up internally with my external. And so I went through the same. And when I wasn't making that shift externally, I was going through a tremendous amount of pain in my body. So my body was actually telling me, hey, Tanya, it's time for you to make the leap. So one day I went in, I quit my job. I was out of there in a month. I moved across the country. I moved from Florida all the way out to the Pacific Northwest. I knew I needed to make some significant changes because I had made them internally as well. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about, once you make that decision internally, how do we move forward externally? Because that's where all the fear comes up, I think. And that's what we need to talk about, is overcoming all the fears of what will they think? What will everyone around me think? So talk a little bit about that in your experience and how you overcame those fears of taking the step.
I'm very blessed because I don't know if this was by design or just the way it worked for me, but my community, the people around me, I have a very small circle, and for me, it's been designed that way, but everybody in my life was so supportive. Like Alan was so supportive. My roommate and best friend at the time was like, yeah, quit your job. Like, if you can't pay rent, don't worry about it. I make enough money where it's not that big of a deal. Like, we'll get through this together. It was amazing.
That's awesome.
So I'm very blessed where I have a really, really impactful, positive, supportive community around me. And I realize that's not the case for most people. But I think what most people need is they need permission. I really believe that when I texted Alan, or I texted him that day, what he did was he gave me permission. He said, quit your job. Like, go do something else. Where if I messaged somebody else, they might have said, well, you need a job.
Yeah.
I mean, come on, be realistic. You're not going to be a podcaster. So just to the beginning of the point is, I believe that your community is going to determine how easy it is for you to make these steps anyway, because they're going to be your sounding board. And if there's any scarcity or fear in them, they're probably going to unintentionally, subconsciously pass that on to you. And that's going to be a challenge. For me, again, it's not normal and it's probably not typical, but when we started talking about it, I was like, I'm going to do this. This is happening. And I'm going to quit my job, and I'm going to be broke, and I'm going to figure out a way to do it. So it was very much momentary for me, where I said, you know what? I have a partner who's already doing this. I need to go all in. And I remember my grandmother asked me, she said, you're going to go look for another job? And I said, no, I will never punch a time clock for somebody else. I will die trying. Like,
I hear you.
I'm do this, or I'm going to die trying. So my experiences aren't necessarily typical when it comes to that. So I just want to make sure I put that out there.
Yeah.
But I think that most people should do more, and I know it's not necessarily easy, but I think most people should try to do more transitional work. So this is the analogy I use. We had somebody on our team who wanted to come full-time, but she wasn't ready to come full-time yet because she had another job. And I said, well, you have to understand, no matter what, you're going to have to crawl through mud. It's either going to be crawling through the mud of working full-time both places, or crawling through the mud of being broke in the transition. And that's up to you. You can do it however you want to do it. I think for most people, it's probably better to be overwhelmed with transition than it is to be stuck out in the middle with no line. That's what I would say is, if you can take your time, because going from certainty to lack of certainty is very, very triggering, especially if you're a certainty-driven human being. I didn't realize being an entrepreneur was as challenging as it is. So I, in retrospect, wish I did a little bit more research on what I was getting myself into, honestly.
Yeah. And I agree with you on that. I did the same. I transitioned. Even though I was working those crazy hours, I started my business on the side. I was seeing clients after hours. I was just really slowly moving into that transition. So by the time I quit the job, I wasn't full time in my other job, my new job, my new business, or what, so to speak. But I was at a point where I was like, okay, I can support myself enough right now to be able to take this leap. And let's talk a little bit about consistency, because I just started my podcast back in March, and I have been very consistent with, regular shows and keeping the flow moving. And I think for me, that's been keeping my motivation and my excitement, around it. And I've noticed it grow and grow and grow. So, what are your experiences with consistency? I know that that's an area where we get stuck, and they said that roughly, what do they say? Like 90% of podcasters don't make it because they don't get past their 10th episode or something like that.
Yeah.
So talk a little bit about that and how, maybe that was a challenge or maybe not, for you in the beginning to be able to grow to the point where you have over 1,000 episodes now.
Yeah. So I believe the stat is most podcasts die between 7 and 21 episodes. That's like the stat across the board. And out of the 3 million-ish podcasts, I think 75% are no longer in production. So that just speaks to the the power and importance of that. This is the analogy I like to use because I think it's visual and I think a lot of people can relate to it. Right now, I cannot do the splits. If I tried every day for the next year, odds are, unless there's some sort of physical, disability or lack of capability, I'll be able to do the splits. Why? It's not because I'm special. It's because I'm doing it more consistently than I was before. So what we have that many other people don't is I have built-in accountability. I have a business partner. So if I don't want to show up, too darn bad. If he doesn't want to show up, too darn bad. So while I can't necessarily say we've struggled with that because we have each other, which I'm grateful for, what I can say is the power of accountability will get you further than you realize. Our team, so we have a 17-person team. Our entire team tracks their habits every single day. Myself and Alan included, everybody can see what I'm doing. Everybody has access to my calendar. Everybody can see everything going on in my life. I don't track my habits just because I'm a consistent human being. I track my habits because I know everybody else can see it. That level of public accountability will help you be more consistent. It just will. If you say, well, I'm going to go run 26 miles, that's a great goal. And I love that. If you post on your social media, hey, I need to raise $10,000 so I can get my marathon bib. Does anybody want to donate? You will be more consistent in your training because you know there's more to lose if you don't do it. The necessity and the accountability is there. So very few things can be accomplished without consistency, unfortunately. But if you have a big enough reason, if you have necessity, if you have public accountability, you are way more likely to be consistent. And you got to think of the biggest artists in the world, Taylor Swift, Michael Jackson, the Beatles, the Rolling Stones. Think of bands like that. They weren't one-hit wonders. They were consistently valued very highly for their music. It's the same way in life. The more consistent you are, the more opportunity you're going to have. And if you struggle with consistency, find a peak performance partner, find a coach, some sort of accountability. It will help you tremendously.
Will, so let me ask you this then. How do you balance being in the flow state and being consistent at the same time? If you have someone constantly keeping you accountable, but now you're trying to be in the flow and have that creativity come to you, how do you balance that? Because I worked alone in the office for 15 years, so I had to learn accountability on my own. There was no ifs, ands, or buts around it. So I naturally can hold myself accountable, but I know not everyone can do that, especially when you're doing your own business. But how do you find that a challenge when you're trying to come up with ideas on your own, so to speak, not necessarily with your group, but having that accountability, does that conflict with being in the flow state?
Not usually. No, not for me, because when I'm in flow is when I'm doing this. So it's almost like just lead me. I just need to be led to the gate. Once I'm at the gate, everything's pretty good. So yeah, it's for me. But again, I'm a pretty unique case because I do this every day, right? This is like my 8th meeting of the day. I've been on this microphone all day but I wouldn't have gotten here if I didn't have the accountability for the last 5 years to get where I am. So yeah, for me, I think it's a little bit different where my creativity comes from the in-between. So like when I don't have a meeting and I can just sit here and like turn the lights off and just be, that's when I get a lot of my ideas, because that's the first time I haven't been proactively speaking or engaging or impacting. Another thing for me is exercise is where I find that. I find like a lot of my flow state, a lot of my just losing track of time and just going is when I'm exercising, when I'm kickboxing, everything else is gone. So that's kind of where I get that out. And I also like rapping and writing music, which I haven't been doing as much, but that's another thing for me. So it's almost like I have to proactively seek opportunity to find flow. And then everything else is kind of showing up and moving the needle. So for me, I think it's more segmented.
I love that because I do that too. I'll do my shows, but in the morning I walk and I have all these, this is when my questions come through. Okay, how am I going to connect with this guest and what types of questions are going to come through? So my flow state, I do feel like movement, however that looks to you, whether that's writing, drawing, painting, working out, walking, whatever that is, it gets that energy flowing and moving. And, So for me, I'm very similar in that is my flow state will kind of ebb and flow a little bit, in the moment. But when I was looking through your Instagram page, there was one that really caught my eye, and it said, where you are now is not where you are forever. And that, I think, is a huge statement, in that people get stuck in a loop, and we get stuck in these limited beliefs. We get stuck, like you had said in your previous job, that you're like, this is where I'm going to be forever. And, can you expand on that a little bit more? How, if someone is stuck in their job, like you and I both were at one point, where we were unhappy, we were having to clock in and out, just being in this autopilot kind of stage that was not purpose driven, it was not fulfilling to us in the areas that we wanted it to be fulfilling. What type of advice can you give people to help them get out of that loop or that stuck pattern?
I would say the one thing that I've seen across the board is you need some sort of new input. And I know that's pretty general advice, but it depends on the person, right? So it's like you could call a friend and say, hey, I need a perspective. I'm struggling with blank. I need some perspective. Can you help me? They might say something that might break it free. You might download a book that makes you think in a different way. You might watch a TED Talk. You might watch a YouTube video. I really think that if we want to change our internal state and our internal thought process and our own level of awareness, it has to be some sort of new input. So whatever that is for you, it all depends on where you are in life. For me, it was Alan. For you, I'm not sure. What was it for you, Tanya? What broke you free?
That's a good question. I started to go to conferences, just learning about my energy, just learning about how I can shift my internal reality to reflect into my external. And I noticed I was connecting with different people, and then they were expanding my mindset on things. So I guess for me, it was just, it was doing different things. Like, I think our subconscious mind works in repetition. It works in images. And it's that typical, if you drive the same way to work every single day, you're going to experience the same things. But if you take a different route, you're going to experience something differently. And I think, like you're saying, completely do something different, do something out of the box. It will shift things up where you will then have different experiences. And I talk a lot about timelines and quantum leaping and how we get stuck on a certain timeline. And we have the opportunity, based off of our choices that we make, to shift timelines in any given moment, where you had a choice to call Alan and say, hey, I need some help, or you had a choice to go dark and, maybe not have ended that positively. But, we always have a choice to change, and it all happens in this now moment. So Kevin, when you were in those dark stages, when you were in those moments of thoughts, where you were like, this is not where I want to be, this is not bringing happiness and joy into my life, what is some advice that you can give to people that might be in those dark areas right now that can help them move out of that?
Yeah, I always wish I found perspective in faster than I did, because I think that to our discussion that we were just having, I think that we assume that whatever is happening is going to be happening forever. And that's not the way it works. Like, life doesn't work that way. Life is always changing. There's always ebbs, there's always flows. I heard a book the other day, and it's all about money. I think it's called The Psychology of Money. But he was saying that nothing is ever as good as it seems, and nothing's really ever as bad as it seems. It's just our perception of the activity, it's perception of the action, whatever is going on. So I think at a deep, deep level, you have to understand that the future can be brighter. You have to believe that the future can be brighter for you. It's possible for you. So I think humans must have 3 beliefs in order to take a new action. They must believe it is humanly possible. Is it humanly possible for this to happen? Yes. Is it possible for me personally? Yes, you must believe that. Number 3, will it be worth it? I believe that's where a lot of people get lost, because if you're saying, well, it's not going to be worth it for me to try this thing, it's not going to be worth it for me to get outside of my comfort zone, to apply to new jobs, to become an entrepreneur, you're not likely to take that action because you don't believe it'll pay off. So I would say at a deep level, you have to believe that the future is at least possible to be brighter. And you have to feel that you taking a new action, you getting outside of the realm of normalcy will ultimately be worth it. And I would just say, I would reach out to somebody. I really would. It's very hard in a moment of darkness to create your own light. It just is. It's challenging. It's challenging, but somebody else can highlight something that you've never seen before, and they can give you perspective that you're unable to see. So as much as I would say, yeah, it's important to reflect and check in with yourself, I would reach out to somebody that you trust and say, hey, I'm struggling. Any advice, any support, whatever it is. I think that's probably the most beneficial thing you can get.
I love that. And I think it gives me that visual of someone holding a candle and going to light someone else's candle. It doesn't dim your candle to light someone else's candle. It only creates more light for the both of you. And I think it's so important, you know, because I've been in those dark stages as well. And I working in the hospital. I worked in the intensive care unit. So I saw a lot of grief and loss. I saw people over the bedside of their loved ones pleading for more time. I saw them feeling the guilt and the shame for not spending time with their families or whoever that may be. And so that gave me a fresh perspective on, you know, living in that now moment and being more present with whoever we're spending time with, or even if that's with ourselves, you know, and growing and expanding in ways that we really want to do, and not waiting until our deathbed, you know, to say, oh, I wish I would have done this and that. And so, you know, Kevin, being in a place where you had everything on paper, right? You had the money, you had the girlfriend, you had the home. What was it that you felt was lacking? What's advice that you can give people if, you know, maybe they're in that shell of an existence? And that's kind of what I kind of see it as. It's like the Matrix. I talk a lot about that, so to speak, is that you had everything that society believes would make you happy. But, you know, what was it that you were lacking? What was it that you felt that didn't have that you have now?
I would say one word that kind of encapsulates it all: fulfillment. I believe that I thought the girl would make me happy. I was happy at times. I thought having a fast, loud car would make me happy. I loved my car. Yeah, I loved my car. It made me happy. I thought being just in unreasonably good shape would make me happy. Yeah, it brought me significance, which made me happy. I don't think humans are optimizing for happiness. I think we're optimizing for fulfillment. Yeah. And I think when I got everything and I had that $100,000, I think my thought process was I should feel better. When in reality, I hadn't worked on anything around me to help me feel better. I never reflected on who I was. I never really thought, what do I actually want out of life? And I think that as human beings, and this is where it gets all messed up, we look at people that are very successful, even that word, successful. What does that mean? It means usually they have more than we do. And whatever that means, right? They have more money, more homes, more cars, more boats, more fame, more listens, more downloads, more views, or whatever it is. We have no idea how they feel behind the scenes. So most of us don't have any example of what true fulfillment in success actually means. So we don't know what we're playing for. I think that was what it was for me. And this is the analogy I always use as a podcaster. If this podcast goes well and Tanya likes me, I will be happy. No matter what happens, I will be fulfilled because I am in the process of doing something that is in alignment with who I choose to become. And that's the analogy I like to use. And this is a question I ask people all the time. You'll hear people trying to find their purpose. And people will say, if I gave you $1 billion, what would you do? That's your purpose. I do not agree. If I gave you $1 billion and you had to do something for the betterment of humanity, what would it be? I think that's more aligned with fulfillment than, I'd sip margaritas on the beach. I think that would get pretty old pretty quickly. Yeah, you'd be happy, but that's not a fulfilling behavior. That's dopamine. It's not the same thing. So I think I was missing fulfillment. And even though I've been the brokest I've ever been on this journey, and I've made more money on this journey than I've ever made, the one thing that didn't shift was I've been more fulfilled. I had a moment, Tanya, we got $40,000 transferred over to our bank account. I was happy for 5 minutes. And it was like, oh yeah, I forgot. That doesn't really, I know it helps and it's safety, but that's not fulfillment. This journey is fulfilling. Yes, some of the byproducts of that bring happiness, but I don't think that's what's optimized for.
Yeah. And I think when we're in alignment with our heart and we're doing things that bring us joy from within, that money and that abundance, that prosperity just flows in naturally. And that's kind of been my situation. It's like, when I'm out there doing these podcasts and I'm highlighting other people and we're having these meaningful conversations, I get off the podcast and I'm like, I feel elated. I feel awesome. I feel so excited. And it's because not only am I sharing information with others, but I'm learning through these shows as well. And for me, this is where my heart is at, but it was just overcoming. What's a podcaster? How do I even, do that? I mean, I'm not a millennial. Millennials are podcaster. I had all these limited beliefs that were coming up and I was just, nope. Tanya, get over it. This is ridiculous. You've been a public speaker your whole life. This is what you did on all your jobs. Like, you can definitely do this. And I think a lot of my limited beliefs were coming from internally, and I was kind of beating myself up about it. But then once I committed and I was consistent, I've got speakers booked out through October already. And I'm like, I can't even, handle the amount of speakers that I have, but it's exciting for me because I look at all those speakers and all the things I'm going to learn and all the things I get to share out into the world. So Kevin, is there anything else that you'd like to share that maybe we didn't touch on that you feel would be in alignment, with this show today?
That's a wonderful question. I have a couple quotes, one question and one quote. One of my favorite questions, and it's to raise awareness. That's the goal. Are the people in your life the best from your past or the best for your future? Ask yourself that question every couple of years and see what happens. You don't have to do anything with it if you don't choose, but it will help you at least raise your awareness. That's one of my favorite questions in the world. And one of my favorite quotes that actually lands for me because it's my experience and I guess it's my quote. Your reality becomes the parts of your imagination that you hold on to and pour into the longest. I recorded an episode by myself, episode number 7, however many years ago this was. And I said, I want to be my own boss. I want to be a podcaster, wake up when I want, go to sleep when I want. And here we 1,060 episodes later. And that's what I get to do every day. Yes, it took a lot of hard work, but it was intentional. I thought of this every single day for the last 5 years, however many years it's been, and I've worked at it every single day trying to get a little bit better. So I believe that your reality is based on what you're doing today. Try to be as intentional as humanly possible for as long as humanly possible, and odds are you'll end up in a better place than if you did by accident.
I love that. And I'm big on visualizing as well. And I visualize myself in front of crowds. I mean, I've been to Tony Robbins, I've been to all these, and I visualize myself in his shoes and just feeling the emotion of everyone's clapping. And, in my old job, I used to speak 5,000 people was nothing, but I was speaking on heavier topics like healthcare and death and loss and stuff. But now it's like I get to talk about more lighter things. And I love how you brought up asking yourself that question about the people in your life, because I do that often. I ask, is this person of value to me in who I want to be, or the person that I'm creating? And if that person is not bringing value in my life, or if I feel like they're tethering me down or bringing toxicity into my life, then it's like, all right, I've got to let them go. It doesn't mean that maybe they won't heal and expand and catch up with me at some point. But, it's tough because I think we do get caught in holding on to those people in our past, and they will anchor us into those lower timelines. And so I do feel that that's a really important question to ask yourself is, am I doing things for me because this brings me joy and fulfillment, or am I doing it because I'm trying to please others, around me? And I think, as a glorified people pleaser, that I've kind of gotten over that, I've started to learn that I'm going to move forward and do this. And if those around me are uncomfortable with it, that's their triggers that they need to heal. It's not necessarily mine. So I love that you brought that up. And I think that's an excellent way to end, this show. And I appreciate all that you're doing, Kevin, and all that you're putting out in the world. So how can people reach out to you if they listen to the show and they say, oh, I really like that guy? How do they connect with you?
Well, first of all, I appreciate it if you like me. If not, and I was a mirror, I think to Tanya's point, sometimes that happens, and that's also part of the job, unfortunately or fortunately, depending on how you look at it. We have a podcast called Next Level University. We do an episode every single day all about holistic self-improvement. So you can find us on all the platforms as well as YouTube. And if you want to reach out to me, I do all my DMs. I do all my social media. My handle on Instagram is @NeverQuitKid. I'm happy to give advice. I'm happy to be a shoulder to lean on to the best of my abilities. I want to be there.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show today. And for all of you out there, check out Kevin's podcast, Next Level University. I will leave all the information below, so it's really easy for you to click on. So thank you so much, Kevin.
Thank you. My pleasure.
You deserve to navigate your life as an empath in alignment with health, happiness, and abundance. To learn more about the services that I provide, including Beyond Quantum Healing Hypnosis, EFT Tapping, and the Emotion Code, visit my website at www.thesoulcafe.org.